The melting point of silicon is over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, but it sure fucking felt like that this week.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. Indeed, this is our 14th season finale. Yeah,
Hooray!
mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, you know, don't really have much more than that, if only because 14 seasons. It's an irregular number. Now, next season is probably going to be about the same, if I'm being honest. We never made a big deal about our season finales. Not in about 10 years, let's say. There are reasons for that.
Indeed.
So, but that doesn't mean there aren't going to be changes in the season ahead, because it's been mentioned before, but it will be mentioned one more time. This is Twilight Winter's last show for the foreseeable future. He is departing because of his real life work schedule is about to shift, and he doesn't know where he's going to be. So that means in season 15 he will not be with us. He may be back for season 16. That's 6 months down the line. But for now, we'll turn it over to him for his last news updates. Perhaps ever, perhaps not. Don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this is going to be my last show for the foreseeable future, and basically moving to another department at work. This will be the online shopping department, aka professional shopper. Basically, I'll be getting customers who wish to do the curbside pickup method of shopping their groceries and such, and managing the orders and whatnot. It won't just be me, of course. There's like maybe 3 or 4 of us working at the same time on those orders. And I figured about time I moved somewhere else instead of being up front like I've been for most of my time at work. And this is going to affect my work schedule drastically because the front end is the only one where you can actually um, get a more straightforward schedule. Everywhere else is going to be pretty much chaotic, unless, of course, you earn that, which is what I did on at the front end at least. I'm one of the more unique cases, basically. Um, so, there's that with work. Let's see here. Uh, in terms of other news, I think it'll be this Saturday. We're not entirely certain, but it's coming Saturday. I'm going to get my front porch stained. It's been needing that for some time now, and I've been also helping my neighbor out with his porch as well. It's much larger than mine. Um, and then let's see here. Eh, like I said at the intro, it's been really hot here as well. Summer's kicked into full gear since Monday, though today's been more bearable than the past 2 days. Um, let's see here. Not really anything else really worth mentioning. There was my little um, exploration quest that I did Saturday. Checking out the place where my grandfather used to live, where he passed away years ago. There was that. But yeah, besides that, gaming news. Um, I've been playing Story of Seasons um, for the past 2 days. It's been fun so far. I haven't really got a lot of time into it yet. Seems a little simpler, but that's probably just because I'm still at the beginning. And yeah, plan on playing some other games a little later on. Haven't really figured out what yet. Um, I got some ideas though. Yeah. Besides that, I'm probably still, at least for a time being, unless my schedule actually affects things. I'm gonna be still doing the Monday sessions with Mac and Kira until that's not possible. Though we haven't done that in the last 3 weeks due to numerous reasons.
Sounds like
Maybe
Mac's been
next.
pretty busy.
Yeah, his.
We'll get to him.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it for me.
Indeed. All right. Galax?
Um, well, it's been, and I'm not complaining too hard because I have a friend in Washington who's been seeing triple digits all week so far. But it's been 90s since we got back from the wedding. Until today, when thankfully it cooled off, and it's supposed to be pretty cool for the next few days because I guess we're getting a cold front from Canada, so hopefully I can stop melting and firm back up a little bit. Speaking of which, my cousin's wedding was last Saturday, and I went, and the trip down was not as unpleasant as it could have been, although I had to deal with my grandmother's hearing aid sounding like a leaky harmonica most of the way down. And then the rehearsal and the rehearsal dinner and the ceremony went fine, but the reception they had a band that was way too loud, and they took way too long between hors d'oeuvres and actually bringing the food, and I'm not looking for. Hopefully, I'll never have to go to another wedding again anytime in the near future. Honestly, but apparently it was good for my cousin and his new wife, so that's, I guess, what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope so.
But
Yeah.
I was still glad to be back, even though it was, and thankfully that was before it got hot. Because as while I was wearing a short-sleeved dress shirt, I was wearing long pants, and the wedding party outfits involved jackets. So, if they were doing that in 100-degree weather, I wouldn't have wanted to be there.
Understandable.
So that somewhat limited my video game playing, that and the temperature, because honestly, machines make heat. But I have been trying to continue in Age of Calamity. I pretty much need to progress further in the main story before I can get more of the DLC stuff. I got the Kazuya DLC for Smash Brothers yesterday and had some fun with that. Interesting character. No way in hell am I going to ever remember half the things he can do, because wow, they certainly gave him a lot of different things he can do. And I was playing the demo of a game called Spellblaster that I just backed on Kickstarter because it looked kind of fun. And I think that's about all I got.
All right. Well, Petty, you're up.
Well, the humidity has been hell. It's been like thunderstorming all week, so yeah, that's not been great. Over the weekend, we had to put in 2 air conditioners because the first one my dad messed up either getting insulation foam in it, or he ran it too hard too soon, and the ball of ice messed stuff up inside.
Oh boy.
So yeah, we had to get that one pulled out, get the new one, put that in, exchange the old one. It was a fun time. So yeah, that was a thing that happened, and yeah, um, I have had Friday. I see the doctor about my ear infection issue, or at least I think it is an ear infection. So hopefully that's not anything too difficult to take care of. And yeah, just been kind of playing games. Like I've been playing a little more of Bloodstained. Um, I want to see about getting back into Breath of the Wild, but also the Switch is in one of the hotter rooms of the house. So
Well, the funny thing about Switches is that they're portable.
yeah, but also Breath of the Wild eats the battery like it's fucking candy.
Oh, do you not have a second charger that works for it?
I'm with all the stuff I heard about bricking chargers. I don't want to,
Oh,
try.
yeah. I eventually. I mean, I never had trouble with my fairly high speed cell phone USB-C charger, but I did eventually get a second Nintendo official charger.
Yeah, I
It's also not too. It's also not too hard to pop that out of the dock.
Yeah, but the way I have my dock cable managed, just getting the
fair.
cable itself out would be a pain in the ass.
Yeah, if it was if the cable is tied up after that, yeah, that could be a problem.
Yeah, because we have cats, so especially because they like to try and sleep behind the TV where the Switch is. So yeah, I don't want to wake up one morning to see my Switch, broken, screen cracked on the floor because Kitty tried to cuddle with it. Anyway, yeah, other than that, not a whole lot going on. Just life being life.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's it for me.
All right. As it's my go. Let's see. Not much going on here. Now, as the season winds down, and behind the scenes stuff like no games to play for a couple weeks, and our booking is up to into September right now, so kind of slow on that front. So haven't had a whole lot to do versus most of the rest of the time. It feels weird. I guess in terms of what outside of Twilight's departure will be changing in season 15, no major structural changes or anything like that. The biggest thing is the Sunday reviews. The fourth slot will either be I will take that back over, or it'll be an all of us type of review, depending on the week and depending on what was secured. And as far as filling Twilight's seat, as it were, no immediate plans, which is a departure from previous departures, let's say. But we are in a position where the core trio here and sometimes Mac get to that in a bit. We can sustain the show, but we'll probably eventually, if Twilight doesn't come back, maybe season 16. It's all
try and find someone else who can join or something. I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's kind of one of the things. Do we want to do we want to pull another audience member? Potato and Mr. Sargent come to mind immediately. Do we want to look among our friends? That kind of thing. Do we want Mac involved? Because getting to Mac, he is not here this week. He is not, and we're not doing a episode of Last News Desk on the Left, because he is currently dealing with his periodic life issues, let's call them. That is to say, he has to scrounge out a certain amount of money today, otherwise bad things will happen. I'll let Mac detail those if he wishes when he's able to. Um, Also, as far as our off break attendance of last news desk on the left, I have no idea. This is as shaky as it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, so right now, Mac is not in a position. I can't even say he's got a consistent schedule week to week. It's understandable, but the issues that I've always had around him are still there. And I get that he has to raise money, but it's not really all that helpful for the schedule.
Mhm.
Because I assume that there will be a episode of Last News Desk next week, but I can't promise that.
Yeah, it really
I'm like,
depends on how today shakes out for Mac.
yeah, I'm like, hopefully everything gets righted, but you know, and all we can do is help as much as we can, which admittedly isn't all that much given our various financial situations and you know and such. But now, hopefully, yeah, hopefully next week we'll be, at least Mac will be here to do a episode of Last News Desk. Now, I suppose I'll try to attend, especially given that we don't have one this week. But it's a roll of the dice right now, and I don't like saying that, but I do have to be honest about where Mac is right now, and it's precarious. It is genuinely precarious for him right now, and he needs to prioritize, basically along the same lines as Twilight. He needs to prioritize things that actually pay in the here and now versus maybe sometime down the line.
Mm-hmm.
So, this isn't comfortable to speak about, but once again, this is the second show in as many weeks that had to be canceled because of Mac's current situation. And, granted, season one of Last News, yes, he was stable enough to where, he was there every Wednesday. And, he even showed up here. Like, he, and as far as Mac on this program, it's once again, whenever he can or wants to, he's, he's missed what, a month of shows now?
Something like that.
You know, due to various projects. Okay, fine. But, and I told them this, this kind of unreliability, doesn't exactly exacerbate the trust issues we have with them. And it's not out of malice or anything, but he's just unstable, period, in terms of what he can do. It's unfortunate, but it is also the reality. So that's just that's just how it is with Mac for the foreseeable future. It's kind of how he's been for a lot of years now, if I'm being honest. So yeah, this was a grimmer news update than I wanted to do, but I felt the need to be completely honest as much as possible without getting into specific details. But with that under the bridge for the time being, I would like to move on to the interview portion of the broadcast. And this week, we are welcoming Brian Drake of UpRoom Games.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No problem. All right, so how we like to get started is we like to get to know the people or person or what have you behind the game studio and all that, and we start by asking this question. What got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
man. So, strictly speaking, Pokemon Yellow is full stop. When I was really young, I was obsessed with that game. Really wanted it for Christmas. Got a copy and thought that it could be improved a lot. So I wrote an email to Nintendo, like their customer support line as a child in the 90s, telling them all the ways that it could be better. And all of my ideas for it. And bless that customer support person because they wrote back and told me that my ideas were great. And I was like, well, this is probably my calling since Nintendo has told me that I'm very smart as a 8-year-old or whatever. That was pretty much it. I decided to learn to program from then on and had some ups and downs in that regard, but eventually made it.
Well, I mean, that's good. That's good. Now, did you specifically set out to become a professional game maker, or did you get into programming and just kind of flowed into it?
I got into programming. I guess I got into games first and then tried to learn to program a bunch and kept failing. But eventually figured it out. And I worked for just a couple like web development companies for a few years doing computer graphics, which was kind of what I studied. And then at some point, I just decided that I really wanted to try to do something on my own. And what I loved the most was making games and playing games and watching people play them and enjoy them. So I thought that I would give it a go. So after a few years, just in the normal corporate sector, I guess, I decided to branch out, start doing that.
Okay. Did you have any significant big corporate game development experience?
No, I didn't. I didn't really work. I didn't work at any game studios. I just worked doing 3D graphics for a few different companies that weren't game related.
Mm-hmm. And how was that transition from, web development and 3D graphics to, making a full-on game?
It's both been easier and harder than I expected it to be. It's great on the days when I feel like I get to go heads down and work on the stuff that I like, but then there are all the realities of working on a game and having a game studio that come in as well and kind of trip me up, just dealing with basically everything that's not making games. So the business side of things has been more difficult. But I found the transition to be generally very fun, and I've enjoyed it so far.
I mean, I guess let's get to like the let's say the AAA space. Did you ever have any aspirations to work in that line of development, or was it always like making your own game, indie development scene?
I think once upon a time I had some AAA aspirations. Back when I was really impressed with Morrowind and games like that when they came out, I thought that it'd be really cool to work on those. And it's not something I would discount in the future, but I think part of why I left working for someone else was that I really wanted to try to do something creative on my own. So realistically speaking, it's kind of all been indie aspirations, taking creative control and trying to do something that I enjoy and that other people will enjoy.
Okay. And did you develop anything prior to a token war that we're featuring here? Or is this your first video game project, period?
This isn't my first video game project, but it's my first publicly released project. I certainly made a lot of games in college, and after, just for myself, for my friends, for projects, things like that. But A Token War was my first commercial project that I actually released and had people play. And since then, I've worked on a few other things too that I've put out. Did my first game jam, which was fun, and released a little tech demo of something I'd been working on. So Token War definitely was the first, I would say, in a significant way.
Okay. And I suppose for the uninitiated, what is a token war?
It is a turn-based tactical deck building sort of game. I like to think of it as kind of a cross between like chess and Magic the Gathering is kind of what my inspiration was, where you build up I call a collection, which is effectively your deck of tokens, and then you go through a series of battles by placing those tokens onto a game board, and then you take turns moving and performing certain actions with those tokens based on upgrades that you get and just their abilities in general.
I mean, that's quite the combination of genres, let's say.
Yes.
Oh, I'm like, I suppose before I start my questioning, Alex, is there anything you wish to ask since, you're this is kind of your jam?
Not yet, but I am observing. Observing Petty Finn
Suppose,
playing it. Sorry.
right. Right. I suppose we can start at the top here and inquire why combine deck building with chess or shogi or strategy game.
I think mostly I really enjoy the physicality of something like chess, and I liked the idea of being able to have kind of adjacency based mechanics in a weird way. Like in something like Magic or Hearthstone, you get things that are in Hearthstone, I guess things that are next to this get abilities, stuff like that. And I thought that if you kind of extended that a little bit to something like chess, you'd wind up with being able to affect all adjacent units and have like position matter, and that seemed to lend itself to like tactical gameplay in a fairly natural way, even though it is kind of a weird combination. So I think the inspiration for that was just wanting to play around with imagining I had like cards that I'm sliding around next to each other, and that matters for some reason. It was just that core concept that I wanted to play with, and that's kind of where a token war came from.
I am familiar with some card games that have more significant positioning mechanics. Is the fact that it's a deck building rather than like deck building in the sense that you are building the deck during the course of each game, right? Not like
Yes.
So I assume that's to some extent an attempt to keep the game balanced and more relatively symmetrical, at least as a starting condition.
Yeah, it's to both keep it more symmetrical, and I don't love the idea of having to like build up a static collection since I'm not like making a massive online game or something. So I kind of like the idea of building a unique deck or collection every time you play. And it definitely does keep the balance a little more straightforward as a starting condition, as you said. And I think it adds to replayability for a lot of things, just being able to start again or start over, and you can make a completely different strategy, play the game entirely differently, and you don't feel locked into like this collection you've built up or treasured or something like that.
Right. I mean, I suppose there's several things I wish to ask. I suppose we can start with movement. Was there any particular reason you went with tile-based maneuverations versus hex-based?
I think that since I wanted the units or tokens to be able to move more than one square, the kind of tile strict grid based seemed easier to grasp as a player because you're kind of moving like a queen in chess. And if you do something like a hex grid and you can move 3 spaces, I feel like it can be kind of difficult to visually parse what that would mean necessarily. So I think I chose the grid just to make it approachable as something that you could pick up and hopefully understand as you see a new token, see how far it can move, hover over it, get that much visual clutter, things like that. So it was mostly just for ease of understanding.
Okay. And this might seem to be a weird question at the outset, but it does have its importance. And yes, and Magic the Gathering, but this game isn't actually based off of those, just inspired. Is this game licensed in any way? Like, is it using any sort of pre-existing rule set or kind of game mechanics, or even license for some sort of board game?
No, it's not licensed in any way. It's all original.
No.
Who keeps dropping and coming back?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what's going on here, but my connection's a bit spotty. In case you didn't hear the question, is this game based on anything licensed, or did you come up with the entire rules, tokens, the plot, all of that stuff?
Yeah, all of that is original. There's nothing licensed.
Okay. And so therefore, we can start with, so who are you fighting? Who are you? What's the storyline going on here, if any?
It's a pretty loose storyline, I would say. As a designer and a player, I'm kind of mechanics first. So you are playing as an unnamed commander who is just starting out on their first war campaign, urged on by a mysterious benefactor who sends you letters and notes, and they're kind of quippy and sarcastic as they kind of encourage and egg you on into this quest for domination, even though there doesn't seem to be a clear-cut reason why. I was kind of playing with the name a little bit. It's a token war. There isn't necessarily a good reason for it, but hey, you're here, so smack those bad boys together.
True enough. And now turning to the individual units, I can see that there are some movement differences. Are all of those chess inspired, or some of them? What units can move which ways?
So every unit moves like a queen in chess for the number of squares that it's depicted on its full pop-up card. So the big grunt can move 2 squares, either straightforward or on a diagonal, and that's just the general movement rule. There are some units that can sort of break these rules, like the scout is agile, so it moves in the same directions, but it can jump over units or obstructions on the battlefield, whereas most units, if there's something in front of them, they run into it, and that's kind of inspired by the knight in chess, which can hop over other units. And there are some that can switch
Ironically,
places.
the knight spaces are not targetable by...
Yes, that is true.
Yeah. And delving further, what is the goal? How do you win?
The goal is to destroy a single building that the opponent has, called the stronghold, which just kind of serves as you can think of it like a king in chess. I've always loved the fact that chess is a game where you can take out all your opponent's pieces, or maybe you can just somehow checkmate the king. So I really like that as a mechanic, being able to sometimes just ignore everything on the field and go for a clever victory. So the way you win or lose is by destroying the enemy stronghold, or you lose if yours is destroyed. And it doesn't matter how you do it. You can just destroy tokens first if you want. You can go right for the stronghold. You can try something cheeky by damaging both at the same time. However you do it, that's the goal.
Honestly, if it reminds me of anything, it reminds me of Advance Wars. Not as comprehensive.
Yeah, you don't have the build system really or whatever, but
still basic idea though. Either destroy all the enemy or capture the base. And being compared to an Advance Wars, no bad thing. And
so speaking of that, are there any plans on having scenario stuff, or is it always just going to be a symmetrical at the start match?
So it's never really symmetrical at the start. It is kind of in the beginning. It's a little more symmetrical, but it gets pretty asymmetrical pretty fast since the enemy setups get pretty weird, and the spaces that you can set up your units are sometimes completely not even related to how the enemy can. Sometimes you're surrounded entirely. Sometimes you surround them. Sometimes it looks quasi-random.
Okay, so it's mostly scenarios.
Yeah, every single map is basically its own scenario where you can treat it as a puzzle if you want, but like once you get out of the first zone, the enemy setups start getting more procedural. So like the units that they're using and where they're placing them start getting more random, bounded by a rule set, of course, but it won't be the same each time, but the map layout is, and the enemy's general strategy is usually similar. So each battle kind of plays out like a mini scenario where you can attack it a lot of different ways, but there's usually something unique about each battle.
Right. And I'm seeing some raised squares here. Is terrain a factor in the battle?
Yes, it is. So, as everyone knows, once you have the high ground, it's all over. So I decided to, since making a computer game, not actually making a board game, I can just lift up whatever tiles I want because the computer will do that. So they give units more attack, more defense, based on how high they are or low in elevation.
And I suppose we focused a lot on the board game aspect of this, but I kind of want to switch over to the card game because, and I suppose the first question there is, how does the card game affect the board game?
So the card game kind of affects your overall strategy as you kind of build up your army. You'll get upgrades to your stronghold that kind of favor certain strategies. Maybe that's unit heavy, or building heavy, or maybe investing in spells, which are kind of one-off actions that you can use to have some sort of effect. And you get new tokens, spells, and things as you win battles. So the card game informs kind of how you're going to attack each battle. So you basically are building up a strategy inside your collection, or multiple strategies if you want. And then you're trying to play them out on the board against what happens to be there.
Okay. And how many cards do you get, and how big is your pool?
So your pool is, let me see if I can remember. You have one stronghold, you have 8 spells. Yeah, you can have, I think, up to 16 units and 10 structures. So that's what you can kind of take with you at any given time. And you can earn a non-set amount. There are like treasure chests that you can break open and get new rewards and things like that. But you can kind of stick those tokens into a vault, and you can kind of swap them in and out of the collection that you're actually bringing into battle whenever you want.
Okay. And are there any sort of colors, suits, of anything of that nature that would affect play?
Yeah, so as you might be able to see, some of the tokens have a different color border. There's like copper, silver, gold, and kind of a bluish color that I call diamond. And that's something that indicates the power level of the unit, which is something I came up with to keep the battles a little more interesting. Basically, each scenario, you're limited to a certain amount of power that you can actually put forward. And that power is kind of consumed by placing tokens of different colored borders on the battlefield. And the more objectively strong a token is, usually the higher the power cost is to actually field it. So it's kind of important to keep in mind as you're going along. You don't want to just take all of the gold bordered things, even though they're probably better than the silver bordered things, because you're not going to be able to put them all on the field at the same time. So you kind of need to build a more rounded army, if you will.
And I mean, that is fairly typical stuff. Better units usually have a higher cost. It's kind of a fundamental strategy game balance, as far as I know. And how much, in terms of deck, do you get new cards as the campaign progresses?
Yeah, as you win battles, you get a choice of 3 cards normally. So the first few battles, you're just presented with one, and the whole thing is kind of like one big tutorial for the first couple of battles. And then you're usually presented with a choice of 3 different cards that you can pick from after you win a battle.
And is there any sort of hierarchy on the green, blue, red scale there? Or is it just the chromatic colors?
Don't really understand the question.
Sorry. Copper, silver, gold, those all have pretty self-explanatory power levels, if you will. But I mean, what is the interplay between like the green, the blue, the red that I see on the, if any?
There isn't really interplay. The blue is a movement indicator. It shows you where units can move. Red shows you where they can attack, and green shows you where they can use an ability. So, like the building in the bottom right here is a training camp, which every 3 turns can summon a new trainee for you, and just highlights green squares where you can summon that trainee. So that's just a kind of UI thing to help you out.
Okay. Let me see. So, I guess shifting to more developmental aspects. How long did it take you to make this game?
This game took me about 18 months.
Right.
The initial prototype was pretty quick, getting the mechanics down, but I was looking to contract an artist for the portraits and the 3D models and things, and I wasn't able to find anyone that I was happy with, and I was just kind of bad at looking, so I wound up doing all the art myself, which took me quite a bit longer than I expected, so the development time ran a little long.
So is it safe to say that you were the sole creative force on a token war?
I worked with a really good composer for the music and sound effects. But yeah, creative for programming, art, all that stuff was me.
Okay. Yeah, not an uncommon situation that we encounter on this show.
Yeah.
We get our fair amount of solo devs. Like, nothing wrong with that. Like, and in terms of the music, what did you want to invoke in terms of a soundtrack for this game?
For me, I really wanted a soundtrack that would kind of stick in your head and kind of beat to a rhythm of like clicking and moving. I didn't want it to be overwhelming. I wanted it to be very generally kind of relaxing. It's not supposed to be like a really high stress game. It can be difficult at times, but it's not supposed to it's not like a first person shooter where you're trying to feel frenetic or something. So I wanted something kind of relaxing and kind of just like that you could click along to if you're just dragging tokens around, plopping them down. Kind of a bit of a warm feel, I think, was what I was trying to evoke.
Okay. Like, and so like war drums?
There's some of that. Not a ton, I don't think.
Okay. And how well has the game been doing since it got released?
It's been doing all right. I think that it probably hasn't been doing as well as I would like. Although I think that's in large part because I made it too difficult, which is not something that I thought I was going to do. I kept telling myself to not do that specifically. So I've been kind of working to release small patches and balance changes and things like that to make it a little more approachable.
I suppose then, what's the timeline in terms of those patch updates?
I've released, I think, 3 so far. They've just been very incremental since I think with a game like this, it's kind of a fine line between being too hard and way too easy. Like if you feel like there's no chance of you losing, at some point you don't really feel like progressing anymore since you're not really challenging yourself. You're just kind of going through the motions. But obviously, if it's too hard, you just bounce up against a wall and bounce right off of it. So I've been doing really small incremental updates, and there'll probably be another one in the next week or so to adjust the balance a little bit more.
Fair enough. And is that the only thing that's forthcoming for a token war, or are there going to be content updates?
There are going to be content updates, is the plan. Adding new tokens, new upgrades, and hopefully at some point adding new regions to the campaign. It's like a separate island to go to with more battles and something like that, but that would be further away. In the immediate future, I'm looking to add more tokens, more upgrades, more spells, refine what's there, and kind of build on it a bit before I try to do like a larger expansion.
And would this be free DLC, or are these going to, or is some of this or all of this going to be paid?
The new tokens and things would be free. They would just be an update to the game, since I feel like that's kind of the core game. That's if people buy the game, that's what they paid for, and I'm not going to make somebody pay for new tokens. I don't really like that. As for like a second campaign type thing, I'm not really sure yet. It might be paid, it might be free. Kind of depends on where I am at that time.
Fair enough. And we see any sort of porting plans in the cards.
I've been messing around with a mobile version since it's fairly optimized for touch and things like that. I don't have any console plans at the moment since I don't really know what that would look like. But I am investigating mobile ports.
Okay. Are you looking for both iOS or Android, or one platform?
I'd probably do both, likely starting with Android just because I have more experience developing with it. And that would be a good way for me to test the feasibility of it and then see from there. Ideally both, though.
Okay. I suppose my final question is in regards to the computer version, is it Windows only, or is there support for Mac and or Linux?
It's Windows only right now. I'm also potentially working on a Linux port.
Okay. All right, then. So I'll see if my colleagues here have any further questions for you.
I think I'm good.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Everybody's good.
All right. So, that'll about do it. I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being with us here today, Brian.
Problem.
Anyway, the game is A Token War. It's currently available. We are recording this on a Steam sale. So it's $7.79, or the soundtrack bundle for $8.98, currently on Steam. Eddie, play us to the next section. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion. So what is closing out this season? Well, we have decided to talk about the Game Boy Advance Castlevania games. And the reason for that is, if you've been paying attention to the rumor mill, apparently Konami is poised to release a Game Boy Advance collection, or what they call the Konami Advance collection. We don't actually know what's in the bundle. but at the very least, we can make the comfortable guess that it's going to have the 3 GBA games. A lot of the squabbling in terms of discussion is this going to have the DS games? And honestly, I would not count on it.
Yeah, the DS games, aside from it would require a separate emulator, and they're much more intensive games in many ways. They also just require like touch mechanics and shit. At least the first two do, and they actually fairly significantly used the dual screen setup.
Oh, especially Donna Sorrow.
Well, it's a tendency with series that progressed onto the DS to have used the gimmicks a lot in the first game on the system, and then less as it progresses.
Well, also keep in mind, Donna Sorrow came out in 2006, I think. It was a first-year DS game, or 2005. So it was somewhere early on the timeline, and that's where they were really doing the DS stuff. No matter how shoehorned, it's a pretty consistent thing.
Yes, have boss early in the game who gives you an ability whose only purpose is to use the touchscreen to destroy these weird kind of icish blocks in a few areas, I guess.
Yeah, it's honestly not good because this is the shoehorn gimmick side of Nintendo innovation. Like, see, way, way, way too many Wii games to count. Like, but we're not talking about those. We're talking about the GBA games, which are specifically Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance, and Aria of Sorrow. And they are 3 fairly different games.
They evolved a lot between the 3 of them to the point that Aria of Sorrow is a very clear step, or it's very clear comes right before the DS ones, which it does in terms of by that point they'd ironed out a lot of the mechanics and systems and stuff that they would use in the later ones.
Well, Dawn of Sorrow is also unusual in that it's a direct Castlevania sequel in the Metroidvania era.
Yeah.
You didn't it's like you didn't really see that. Or if it was a direct sequel, it's like sequel to something, like Castlevania 3. Or, But once again,
it's a direct sequel with the same protagonist, which doesn't happen very often. Usually it's like, congratulations, you've done your thing. You beat Dracula or whoever it was that was trying to bring him back from the dead this time. You can retire now, unless you are Simon Belmont, Soma Cruz, or I think like one other guy Richter, who had the whole thing, but he wasn't the protagonist for his second game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a weird situation, but specifically the 3 Game Boy Advance, like 2 of them are Igavanians. Circle of the Moon is an interesting case because not only was that not done under the auspices of IGA, it was a completely different team. This was cranked out by the developers of the Castlevania 64 games, Konami Computer Entertainment Kobe, which is why it's so different than the other, Metroidvania games on the GBA.
Yeah, I would still qualify it as a Metroidvania, certainly rather than Classicvania. There's exploration, there's items to collect, you do level up. But it's clearly not quite sure I mean, this is after Symphony of the Night. It's clearly not sure exactly what parts of Symphony of the Night it wants to include. There's no in-game economy or shop, so you only get things from drops. And that includes the game's rather extensive magic system. though the magic system. Yeah, it's called the dual setup system or something, where you get like
The DSS.
Yeah, you get a set of, I think it's 10 of each kind of card. One of them are God's cards, and the other ones are Legendary Beast cards. And you equip one of each, and the God cards, I think, determine what element it is, and the Beasts determine what kind of effect it is. And there's actually a glitch in the game where you can actually equip the things without getting them first. Which is kind of convenient, because otherwise it's really fucking easy to like not get them, because they're random drops from enemies, and not all of the enemies they're random drops from are common. But yeah, like the more you get of them, the more options you have, because like first you get if you have to get I think the first ones you get are Fire and Whip Enchant, which gives you a Fire Whip. But then if you get Stone, you have a Stone Whip Enchant and a Fire Whip Enchant. And then if you get Summon, you have a Stone Summon and a Fire Summon, and so it just increases multiplicatively, which is cool. But it would be cooler if like some of them were guaranteed to get. Likewise, healing items, armor, are also random. And while there are a decent number of traversal abilities that you unlock, some of them are kind of awkward. Two of them exist only to move or break two almost identical kinds of blocks. And then there are some things where your progressive upgrade is just, oh, you found a switch, you hit it, and then there are like a bunch of statues throughout the castle that break. So it's got sort of the spirit, but it has a lot of things are implemented in ways that are a lot clunkier than even the immediate sequel game, or the next game, which is not an immediate sequel. In fact, Circle of the Moon, because it wasn't made by Iga, is also mostly not in the timeline, although you can kind of fit it in. Like, it doesn't contradict much, but it's not like officially included, I think.
Well, I think one of the biggest reasons why it wasn't included is because, Iga eventually settled on the vampire killer being the true source of Dracula's Bane, and that wasn't really a thing in Circle of the Moon. Like,
right. I think you have a different whip.
Yeah.
For that one.
Like, and that was later further retconned into only the Belmont clan can wield the vampire killer whip, which is where the whole connection between Portrait of Ruin and Bloodline comes from.
Or like other people can, but it'll kill them.
Right. Like, like Circle of the Moon, it's a game I've always felt got too much love. I've always had problems with it. I mean, most of it has to do with the fucking random drops. The random drops and the goddamn random drops.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like this is
play this game with. Oh, it also doesn't have. It does have an in-game map, I think, but it doesn't have like an in-game bestiary or anything. I don't think any of the Game Boy Advance ones actually have an in-game bestiary. If they do, if they do, it's only Aria of Sorrow.
It's Aria of Sorrow. I can tell you that.
Which is kind of right, because you get it tells you whether you've gotten the souls for things or not.
Yeah, you kind of needed a bestiary in Aria of Sorrow, though I do think, if I'm remembering correctly, Harmony of Dissonance did have a bestiary. It just wasn't as important. Like,
I'm not sure. I remember that being lacking. I know. Anyway, it doesn't have one, and it would have been really useful, because then it could tell you, like, generally enemy profiles in the way they develop the bestiaries have question mark lines that tell you if the enemy drops anything or not.
And how frequent they drop it.
Even without that, knowing that skeleton that throws rocks drops something, and skeleton that throws bones doesn't drop something.
Right.
you'll know which one you want to whack at to try to get the DSS card or a supply of potions or actual equipment, because this game has like 3 or 4 equipment slots and you're not guaranteed to get anything to fill any of them practically.
And let me tell you, another problem trying to 100% the game is like the Coliseum. That is a late stage area, really fucking hard. And the thing is, it's got a couple of card drops in it. And
having an area like this, I believe, is fairly common in a lot of these games, where it's just like, oh, hey, here's a series of rooms with monsters in them that you can't go back, that if you go into, you can't back out, although there's usually a wimp out door about partway through.
yeah, mind you, this is always bad design.
I don't know.
Like-
I don't think it's that bad. But the map design actually for Circle of the Moon is pretty interesting, because it starts out with you falling into the basement and you have to kind of fight your way out.
Mm-hmm. Like, and it is worth noting, like, this game hides its stuff more than other Castlevania titles.
Some of them are hidden, and some of them are not hidden, but really easy to fucking forget. Like, there's an item, like, there are a bunch of really early in the game, like, chests or power-ups behind shovable and breakable blocks. And you'll probably remember to come back when you get the first one of those power-ups, because it's not too far away. But by the time you get the second one, you're on the other ass end of the castle. And you have to remember to, like, jump back down to the goddamn basement to get the item.
Right. And also worth noting, this is the Game Boy Advance game that has the most problems with its graphics on a Game Boy Advance.
Oh, right, because it was an early Game Boy Advance game, which means it was developed on Game Boy Advance dev kits and not on actual Game Boy Advance hardware.
Actually, it goes further back. This was originally a Game Boy Color game that got moved up to the Game Boy Advance, which I think explains what happened. Because a feature of early Game Boy Advance games is a really bright, almost garish, washed out color palette, because the original Game Boy Advance system did not have a backlight.
Yeah, it had a very dark screen that you needed to get the light shining on it at, like, just the right angle to really be able to see the color well.
And have about
and this
10 times
game
the
was-
amount of the light as produced by the sun.
Yes.
And this game's color palette was designed like a Castlevania game, meaning it's fucking dark.
Yeah.
It's actually quite playable on anything other than a classic Game Boy Advance.
Mhm.
But on a classic Game Boy Advance, you can barely make out your character sometimes.
Yeah. I'm like I said, I would chalk that up to it being basically an upport of a Game Boy Color game.
Well, and some early Game Boy Advance games just had that problem too.
Right. You know,
Because I do believe that the dev kits had better, dev kits you hook up to a screen.
right. No, it's something that's definitely not in the other two games. They have markedly brighter visual colors and all that.
Harmony of Dissonance actually has the exact opposite problem. If you're playing it on a classic Game Boy Advance, the bright and garish colors and freaking baby blue outline around your playable character at all times make it actually pretty playable. If you're playing it on something with a good screen, it looks a little bit bright for a Castlevania game.
Once again, that's the exact thing I was talking about. That, like, the Game Boy Advance SP was what, 2004, 2003, like
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
so. And this came out in 2002. Like I said, it's a hallmark of early Game Boy Advance games, because you only had GBA Classic. And well, yes, you could mod it to have a backlight. That wasn't an option for everyone.
You actually can't mod it to have a backlight. You can mod it to have like a side light.
Whatever.
Because
Yeah.
that's part of the weird thing about the Game Boy Advance's screen is that the back of the screen isn't transparent.
I'm like, my point is that, I think the SP light's technically a front light, but that's neither here nor there. It doesn't have a light to brighten up that screen.
Mm-hmm.
Because Nintendo's always thinking about what is most cost effective, i.e., cheap, to put in their technology. Most of the time, like the GameCube was honestly the last time they tried to do the power game. But once again, that's neither here nor there. And Harmony of Dissonance. So this is just one that doesn't come up a whole bunch.
And when it does, it's usually kind of underrated, I think.
Probably. I do remember, like, back in the Game Boy Advance's heyday, it was definitely the least liked out of the three.
Mm-hmm.
And like even today, it exists. And that's probably due to just some flat design. Like, even though I would say that this does the whole dual castle thing much better than Symphony of the Night. It's
the neat thing about the dual castles in this game is that you're interacting with it starting fairly early on, but you don't realize you're interacting with it until about 2/3 of the way through the game.
Yeah.
Because the way it's mixed in with the fast travel system. Like, you get to a teleport thing, and it teleports you to another room in the castle in the other version of the castle. And you notice on your map that your explored color is different after teleporting. But you don't really know what that means until you get the plot revelation after teleporting again and going back to the original castle. And then you start re-exploring some of the same areas and being like, oh wait, this is a different castle.
Yeah. Harmony of Dissonance also marks a return to the Belmont clan. Like the first time since maybe Castlevania Legends, I think.
It's Just Belmont, who is, I think, Simon's great-grandson.
I think his grandson. It's 50 years after the event of Castlevania.
So Simon Soleil Juste.
Something like that. But also, for a castle that's only supposed to come back every 100 years, it comes back a lot more than 100 years.
There is one scheduled resurrection about every century.
Mm-hmm.
But Dracula is brought back early by World War I later on, and by several various evil priests just saying, fucking, okay, I want to revive Dracula, and that doesn't work. And actually, one of the interesting things you can notice is when it's a natural resurrection that happens by itself, he usually looks younger. But that might just be a coincidence.
Yeah. And the big system here is I forget if it has a proper name. It's basically a combination system.
It's based on item crashes, I think, because you collect some. You have sub weapons and your whip like normal, but then it's called spell fusion apparently. But then you find spell books throughout the game, which you can combine with the sub weapons.
Yeah.
To perform much more powerful attacks at the expense of they cost. I forget if it's MP or hearts or what. I think the sub weapons just cost hearts, and the spell fusions cost MP.
Mm-hmm. And it's further added upon by experience points, and the relics from Castlevania 2 make a return. It's one of the most.
Those are equipable. This game, you're much more likely to realize that there are enemy drops. There's actually a mini boss you can beat relatively early in the game who gives you a pretty solid, complete set of armor, if I recall correctly.
Hmm.
I think that was this one.
That being said, I think the biggest sin that this game made was being too easy. Like,
kind of.
it,
This game does have a shop, but it's only available late game and doesn't sell that many things. And you can only get money, I mean, aside from killing things, the only things it accepts to buy are gems that are not good for anything else.
yeah. Also, this game has, because it's two castle, it has a lot of bosses. A lot of the bosses are normal enemy, but made big. And they're not too impressive.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, this game was an absolute technical demonstration of what the Game Boy Advance could do. Like, I'm specifically remembering the big golem you run away from at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, I think it's called Talos.
Yeah, Talos, who as an actual boss is kind of a joke, but he's here to demonstrate. Look at what we can do on the Game Boy Advance. Like,
Yeah,
even
the attack animations for the spell fusions, especially the summoning ones, are also very pretty.
uh-huh. But I suppose, let us get to the main event here in terms of the Game Boy Advance Castlevania games. And that's Aria of Sorrow. This is, this is not only regarded far and away as the best Castlevania game on the Game Boy Advance, but just in general, one of the best Castlevania games ever made.
Yeah, it features a significant plot twist, which I'm not going to spoil here on the off chance that anyone here's been under a rock that didn't have any Castlevania under it. It progresses the timeline further than any other game except for its own sequel. It actually takes place in, like 2050 something?
I think 2035.
2030, yeah, that sounds right. Anyway, it takes place after the year 2000, which is a big deal because Dracula was allegedly finally killed in the year 1999.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And Soma Cruz is one of the most iconic Castlevania protagonists we've seen to date.
something pimp coat.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's also helped that the
It also has a significant supporting cast of characters that you actually kind of like.
well, kind of like and you'll eventually play with. That is a
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
well.
Although
I mean, I think this is
Sorry.
I think this is kind of an aspect we've not covered it in that. Circle of the Moon had a lot of bonus modes. Like you could
it's basically D&D class versions of mostly. I think you could play as Maxim. No, wait, Max. That was the next one. I think you could play as whatever the fuck. Hugo? Is it Hugo?
I think so. I'm not remembering offhand. Like, but in Aria of Sorrow, you basically get Richter mode.
Except it's Julius, who is Richter's great whatever grandson, and the one who did the thing where Dracula allegedly finally died.
Yeah, and Dawn of Sorrow would expand this into a full-on. Let's do Castlevania 3 again, basically.
Yeah,
because
you, in addition to playing as Julius again, you get to play as two of the other supporting characters in the game. Yoko Belnades, who is a descendant of Sypha Belnades, and can do magic stuff. And Genya Arikado, who just is Alucard. He decided to go to Japan and change his name and stuff with black hair, but he actually switches back to his Symphony of the Night sprite when you're playing as him, I believe.
Yeah. And I guess paramount to the success of Aria of Sorrow is its system.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly,
interestingly, for both of those, When you're playing in Julius mode, the way you unlock it is by getting the bad ending.
Right.
Because that has plot repercussions.
Yeah. But yeah, the tactical soul system, which is, you absorb the soul of your enemy, and you will be able to do things.
So yeah, any monster enemy in the game, when you kill them, has a chance of dropping a soul, and they do there are bullet souls, guardian souls, the fucking one I can't remember, enchant souls, I think.
Yeah.
And then
And-
ability souls. Abilities are the usual things that are usually relics, like sliding and double jumping. Guardian souls are shoulder button, and you usually hold them to do their thing, although some of them are just tap and activate or deactivate. Enchant souls are just passive, improve your stats or luck, or make it so you can eat poisonous food and heal from it. They're passives. And bullet souls are, I mean, they're effectively the same thing as sub weapons, except for there's a bajillion of them, and they do all kinds of weird, neat things.
And
Like you have your axes and your knives and stuff, but you also have your giant fucking axe that attacks half the screen, and your whap an enemy with a cloth, and it switches their magic points with their hit points, which can potentially give an enemy a fuck ton of hit points, or potentially kill them immediately because they don't have any magic.
Right. Also worth noting, because this game is set in 2035, in addition to your usual, someone's on the sword end of the spectrum.
Yeah, he plays more like an Alucard than a Belmont, although he can get some whips.
Yeah, he also can get a handgun. Yeah,
it sucks.
Yeah.
In New Game Plus mode, there's a silver handgun, which sucks a little bit less, I think. And I think there might be another actual gun weapon. And then if you beat the boss rush mode, one of the special gimmick weapons you can unlock from that, in addition to a teddy bear filled with lead shot, and I forget the other one, is a fucking positron rifle, because sure, why not? It's actually not as overpowered as it sounds. It's it does about half the screen length of fire damage. That's pretty high. But, positrons are antimatter.
Yeah.
Quiet you.
Also worth noting that this, the artist on this was Ayami Kojima, who
Yes, that's the other thing about it. It's very pretty.
Who is just universally regarded as having a superior art style to the DS sets.
Well, the first two DS games, I'm not Order of Ecclesia. Order of Ecclesia is also amazing. But yeah, the first two DS games had a very anime art style. And some people did not like this, even though really it's mostly fine.
Yeah. And like, Aria of Sorrow was not her last Castlevania game, but if people are wondering why they all of a sudden, with Dawn of Sorrow, switched over to this generic anime thing versus, the rich European portrait style, that's because Ayame was busy with the console Castlevanias. She was doing art for Lament of Innocence and Curse of Darkness.
I was wrong. The bear full of lead shot is actually in Dawn of Sorrow. The other one in Harmony, the other one in Aria of Sorrow is Excalibur. Note, Soma Cruz, in spite of all of his things, is not King Arthur. However, he is very strong. Excalibur is a hammer-type weapon because it's still in the stone. You're just swinging around the sword with the stone on the end of it.
I mean, that's a Castlevania hallmark. Let's just grab all of the public domain stuff. But yeah, like, as to which is the better game, in terms of Aria versus Dawn, that's going to be an eternal debate. There are
they both have nice things.
Yeah.
Dawn of Sorrow has a neat... Well, in Aria of Sorrow, if you get more than one of any given soul, it doesn't do anything. In Aria of Sorrow, you can get up to 9 of any given soul, and getting them increases their power. And they also do this to change there being different enchant souls for Constitution +4, Constitution +8, and Constitution +12.
Oh.
And I think also 16.
Anyway,
It just makes an increase to that. They also have a system where you can fuse souls into weapons, and to get some of the best weapons in the game, you need to fuse in souls that come from late game bosses that you can only get one of per playthrough.
yeah.
So that's a thing.
Yeah, that's a thing that Dawn of Sorrows approved upon mostly, because you could carry more than one soul.
Mm-hmm. You can also trade souls in that game, and I think items between files.
Yeah. But even though Aria of Sorrow was the last Castlevania game on the Game Boy Advance, it's not the end of the legacy of Castlevania on the Game Boy Advance. I know that sounds confusing, but this is where we shift over to Shaman King. Because the Shaman King Game Boy Advance games actually used a version of the Aria of Sorrow engine. Mind you, it's a strip.
I did not know that, and that actually kind of makes me want to see how it goes.
Alex is now going to be tracking down some Game Boy Advance stuff. Yeah, never played them myself because Shaman King just wasn't a thing I was into. Not a surprise because this was a thing that was being released on 4Kids in the mid 2000s. And
also, it's another one of those shonen series that does a thing where they have a really interesting setup and then Shanghai it about, I don't know, a core or two in to be a pretty much exclusively a tournament fighting thing. Although it's still, unlike some of them, it still actually has some interesting story stuff and good characters.
Remembering reviews back in the day, the games were pretty positively received, if I'm remembering. They use going back to they used the engine of Castlevania, but it was from what I understand, it was stripped down. And they are Shaman King Legacy of the Spirits. I want to say Soaring Hawk and Sprinting Wolf. Not sure if Master of Spirits do. I'm not exactly sure which ones are, because once again, Shaman King's kind of a foggy thing for me. But they're probably I don't know how much they cost. I don't think they're in any sort of serious demand because I do remember that they are seen as inferior to the Castlevania, Aria Sorrow game and Harmony of Dissonance.
It might be interesting to see how they compare.
Yeah. But yeah, weird side legacy to the GBA Castlevania games. Or maybe less weird because that's kind of how video games work. Now, as far as the collection itself, well, it's unannounced, so we don't actually know what's in it. Not just a list of things, but what sort of extras might be in the package, if any. But we could perhaps look to the previous Castlevania collection, or indeed the other Konami collections that were released in 2019. And there are 2 tracks that can be taken here. And indeed, it's
Legacy of Spirits was a Pokemon clone. It's Master of Spirits and Master of Spirits 2 that are Metroidvanias, I believe.
There we go. Like I said, there were a lot of Shaman King games, far more than you would expect. But it was a big Shonen Jump thing, so of course it got a lot of fucking games.
Mm-hmm.
Most of a good chunk of them Japan only. Though I think the interesting thing about the Legacy of Spirits games is they only came out in North America,
Yeah.
which is doubly weird. Or I think I'm looking at, and I think I can see the problem or the thing. Bandai had the Japanese license to Shaman King, which does not surprise me in the least. Like Bandai or Bandai Namco having Shonen Jump licenses is pretty standard. Has been for decades. Yeah. But Konami clearly had the North American rights, so we get exclusive games. Anyway, getting back to the collection, it has been reported that this is being done by M2. If you don't know who M2 is, that's a topic of discussion for another day, now that I think about it, because M2, they're one of the more celebrated retro developers, in both terms of porting old games to new systems and building new games from classic franchises. Like, just to cite Konami here, they're the ones who did the Rebirth games on WiiWare, which needs a fucking re-release on its own. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but WiiWare isn't a thing anymore. And if you don't have those games downloaded, they're lost to the four winds, which is unfortunate. But M2, which I believe they did the previous Konami collections, and all rock solid stuff. In terms of extras, pretty skimpy, if I'm remembering. Like there's like a book of history that you can see in PDF form. It does lineage things, but nothing like a video document, any sort of video. Maybe this will be different for the advanced collection. As far as physical stuff, not really M2's department. That all depends on if Limited Run is going to be handling a physical version. They just did or are doing a limited run of the Castlevania Legacy Collection on the Nintendo Switch. So there is potentiality there. As far as when it's going to be announced, any day that Konami feels like it. Now, it's up to them. Konami's been announcing random ass shit recently. Like they just announced that they've entered into a strategic partnership with Bloober Team. A translation: guess who's your next Silent Hill developer? Because why the fuck else are you hiring Bloober Team? Like, genuine question. Because what are they known for? Layers of Fear, Blair Witch, The Medium. They're kind of an indie horror specialist. I won't say darling because I've seen a lot of people who do not like Bloober Team. Like, as far as Bloober Team on Silent Hill, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, but like, it does continue the Konami tradition of assigning, in this case, not random developers, but remember that like Silent Hill Homecoming, developed by Climax Studios, of which we did an interview with a few years back. But my point is, it's not any less shocking than what Konami's done post Team Silent. I'm like, apparently there's also a prominent Japanese developer doing a Silent Hill game, but that's what those beta rumors have. Anyway, so yeah, that'll about do it for the Castlevania GBA games for the time being. It would be nice to refresh the memory, but once again, this thing isn't out or announced. So I would imagine it's probably coming this fall, like, but we'll see. Like, anyway, so yeah, that's the show. That's the season. Once again, there is no episode of Last News Desk on the Left this week, and only time will tell if we'll have an episode next week. But you know, until next season, I shall wish you good gaming.